Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, he was a big proponent of this idea that if you try to prove the existence of God using only rational or deductive logical proof, that doesn't work. You won't be able to give a satisfactory proof of the existence of God, or if you do prove something, it's not going to be the same God that we know of in the Quran, who is Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Malik, Al-Qudus, and so on. You're going to just prove, some abstraction maybe, but it's not going to be the God that we know, Allah, that is described in the Quran. And so he says that, Ibn Taymiyyah says that there are so many other ways that we know about the world around us, and there are so many other ways that we know about Allah. We have ayat, we have signs from Allah, we read the Quran, we read his book, we hear about the prophets, the Anbiya, we hear about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we hear about his miracles, we even in everyday life, we see things and experience things within ourselves or outside in nature, or when we hear about the vastness of the universe, and in our personal lives as well, things happen to us, we have emotions. And so there are all these different things that can happen that elicit our thoughts about God and Allah, and we feel that. And when we pray, for example, in different ibadat, when we worship Allah, these are means by which we get closer to Him, by really devoting ourselves to Him, having ikhlas, having sincerity in our worship, really trying to achieve that yaqeen, that certainty. These are all methods or avenues by which we know God and we experience Him and His signs. So Ibn Taymiyyah is one big example. And in Western thought, another philosopher that's worth looking up is Stanley Cavell. And he has this book called The Claim of Reason. And he also argues that we can't have this very narrow notion of reason and rationality, that in fact rationality is much more expansive than just purely deductive proof or purely scientific reasoning. And he gives a lot of great examples. So that's another book that I would definitely check out. So just to summarize, what we're saying here is that, people ask, how do you know God exists? And oftentimes when they ask that question, they have a couple of assumptions behind that. They assume oftentimes that if you don't have scientific proof of God, then that means you have no reason to believe that He exists. If you don't have a logical proof of God, then you have no reason to believe that He exists. But that's incorrect. We don't limit ourselves to just those two types of proof or those two types of knowledge. In fact, our knowledge is much more expansive than that. How we know things and how we know about the world around us is much more expansive, and we don't have these kinds of narrow, this narrow view of how we perceive the world around us. So that's how I would address this question. This is how I've addressed it in the past. I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Feel free to comment on the video and leave your questions or suggestions. And ultimately, hopefully you'll be able to better address this question using some of these ideas that I've given you, and inshallah it'll be beneficial. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.